Hey everybody, it's Henry Steele. Today is January 17th, 2024, and this video is the second in a series of videos I'm doing about basic trading skills. One of those skills is the ability to pick out support and resistance levels. So in this video, we're going to look at basic support and resistance levels and how to produce them. Now, before we get started, let me go ahead and remind everybody that the contents of this YouTube channel, all my old videos, are going to eventually be moved to the new channel called Henry Steele Classics. You can find that channel by doing a search on YouTube or go to the description of this video and you'll find a link to that new channel there. So if you're ever looking for any of the old videos I've done and can't find them on this channel, that means they've already been moved to the new channel. So with that out of the way, let's talk about support and resistance. Basic support and resistance. This is the S&P 500 index, the daily chart right here. Support and resistance is a pretty easy concept to get a hold of, to grab a hold of. It's not hard. It's basically any time on a price chart that you have a top or a bottom, that's going to create a line horizontally where you have support or resistance. So as an example, this top we have way back here in January of 2022, sorry, not 1922. Let me put a line up here. This is a line of resistance. And we call it resistance because the market is below it, and if the market tries to come up to it, this line will tend to resist the market from breaking above. If we were to create a low, or not a low, but create a line off of a low right here, we would have support as long as the market's above this line. So for instance, we made this line of support right here. The market's above it, so it's a support. We see, let me zoom in here, we see that the market came to this line and reacted off of it and then eventually broke below this line of support. Since the market was then trading below the line, this became a line of resistance. So as the market traded up here, it couldn't get to the line right there. It came down right here. It kind of balanced right on that resistance line, couldn't break through it, and then it traded lower right there. So in a nutshell, that's really the whole concept of support and resistance simplified. Anytime you have a high or a low, you put a line on the chart, and then you have support and resistance lines. Whether it's a support line or a resistance line basically just depends on where the market is relative to that line. So if you create a line from a low, that means the market has traded above it, so this starts out as a support line because the market's above it. And if the market comes back down, it can find support. If you create a line from a high, that means that the market has, that this line starts as a resistance line because you traded below it and the market would have to come back up to it to face this line again. And as we can see, this line, which is about 2 years old now, the market's getting very close to it right there. So we are finding that this line, this right here, is producing a bit of resistance for the market's price action today, even though it's a couple years old. So these lines can last for quite some time. In fact, this low right here, we find the market reacting to it here. We find the market reacting to it here. Here the market, let me zoom in a little bit, the market kind of consolidated right around this line. Again, this line, the market found support there before it broke through. And then it found resistance there. It traded below it, and then this was an area of resistance again. And then it happened again. And then we had consolidation here again. And then right here, months and months later, we see support again. So just because you draw this line way back here doesn't mean that it's not going to be able to be active, so to speak, for a long period of time. Now, if we go ahead and delete these, we can see the second main type of support and resistance. So the first type, which is the one I just talked about, is where you draw a horizontal line on a top or a bottom. There's also another type of support and resistance where you draw an angle. instead of a horizontal line, you go from a low to a low or a high to a high. We'll pick this high up here to this high right here. And these lines, because they're coming from highs or lows, can also be seen as support and resistance lines. Now, they're not horizontal, obviously. They're not moving side to side without moving up or down at all. They're on an angle, but they can still produce support and resistance. And you can see right here, for instance, drawing this line right here, when the market came back up to it, it found resistance at this line right here. And then it came down, found resistance again, and then finally broke above it, and then came down and found support on this line right there. So you'll find that you can produce a significant number of support and resistance lines in a market. And the way to get around having just dozens and dozens of lines, because if you really wanted to, making a line at every top and every bottom, you'd have lines all over your chart. What you want to do is create a zone of support and resistance. And here's an example of how to do that. So let's look at this high right here back in early 2022. We see that there's a high right here. We see that there's a lower high that comes right after it. It's not quite as high, obviously. We see that there are lower highs right before it, the first one being here, then here, and then here. So if we put a line, that one jumped a little on me, there we go. If we put a line on all of these, we can delete all of the lines that are in the middle, and what this creates here is an area of support and resistance instead of just having a singular line, because we had multiple topping action from the market's price in this area right here in a relatively small area. We can consider this entire range a support and resistance range. And we see that if we zoom out and come back to now, this is where we're at in the market right now. We're right inside of this support and resistance range. So the market coming all the way back up here is reacting to this area of support and resistance right here. Right now, it's resistance because it's resisting the market from going higher. If the market were to break above this area significantly, it would probably come back down and find support in this area right here. So we have three main things to be looking at: creating horizontal support and resistance lines, creating angular support and resistance lines, and then when we have a topping area or a bottom area where we have multiple bottoms or tops happening within a relatively small price area, we have a support and resistance zone that was created. So the concepts are pretty easy. I would recommend that anybody who's interested in this topic go ahead and pull up your favorite price chart and play around with it a little bit. Now, I know this is one of the most basic topics of trading, and that a lot of people discover support and resistance pretty early in their trading. But if this isn't something that you're completely familiar with, I highly recommend you spend a little bit of time actually playing around with it.